I want to continue on this conversation of what happened Wednesday nights with the Bulls bowing out to the Milwaukee Bucks 4-1 in the first round of the NBA playoffs here on the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, of course, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado. The marvelous, you saw DeMar DeRozan and Zach and Caruso, but not those two last ones, play in their final game of the season, one due to safety protocol and one due to a concussion. And DeMar was shut down this series. Vucevic put up a bunch of threes. Pat Williams put up a lot of points towards the end, but didn't get a single rebound. It was a team that just ran into a Greek buzzsaw and just didn't have enough talent. But when you were watching what happened in the end of that series that ended up 4-1, the Bulls only winning that one game, that was really interesting that they were so close those first two, but the rest of this series was a blowout. The marvelous, this is your opportunity. We couldn't go on this whole episode without getting your thoughts of what we saw, the putting to rest the 2021-2022 Chicago Bulls. Your thoughts on this campaign and what ended in the first round of the NBA playoffs.
Well, a lot of people thought it would be a sweep. So the fact that it went 5 games was pretty remarkable. I don't know exactly if Milwaukee took the Bulls lightly in the first 2 games or what, but obviously they were the better team, no question about it. And there were some signs actually in those games in Milwaukee, the first 2 games of the first half of the season, first 50 games of the season Bulls, where they, you know, they had a terrific record and they were number 1 seed. But, you know, the 19-point loss in the finale was tough, but they didn't have LaVine or Caruso. Now, I'm thinking they may not have LaVine again next year because he's a free agent. So he may go for the money. So that may be what things look like next year without you know, the 2 top scorers. They really could use LaVine back, but I'm worried that he's going to be gone. And I keep thinking, didn't they get him for Jimmy Butler as part of that trade? So, I mean, I'd rather have Butler, but that's another story. In any event, I mean, the season goes on. I mean, it's quite interesting. You get the Bucks and the Celtics is the next series, and in the East, and it should be very interesting to see Miami and Philadelphia being the other one, who prevails there, because I mean, I thought that the matchup with Milwaukee was about the toughest, even though Boston was quite hot. It just seemed as though that was based upon their previous performances against Milwaukee. It looked like kind of a hopeless situation, but they managed to get the win, and that give them credit. DeRozan got the 41 points in game 2, and that seemed to be the formula for success when they were doing well earlier in the year. But when they have their, you know, full staff, full complement of players next year, and whatever they add, hopefully will be a formula for success. They did a remarkable job for the first 40, 50 games this year, and hopefully they'll be able to replicate it next year. And as you look at it also, I mean, again, the West is tough too. I mean, if they ever got to the finals, I mean, Phoenix, you know, is playing Dallas, and you've got the matchup now between Memphis and Golden State. And Golden State with Curry back looks like a team that might be strong and get there. I think that the Golden State, it looks like a team that's hot right now. So we'll see what happens. It should be interesting to watch the rest of the playoffs. So and I'm anxious to do that. And you know, playoff time. It's a great time. The NBA, NHL starting their playoffs tomorrow without the Blackhawks, and you know, the locals can watch the Wild versus the Blues and see what we're missing that would get us to the position where the Blues and the Wild are, because they're in the playoffs and we're not.
You know, marvelous. It's so funny you bring that up, because the Chicago Bulls towards the end of this series started becoming a lot of Bear-isms, and I'll tell you what I mean in a second. So when you watch the Chicago Bears on a Sunday, and then you go to Red Zone or watch any other game on CBS or Fox, you realize that they're playing different football than what we see at Soldier Field. It's just not the same. Towards the end of that Bulls series with the Bucks, because they were so depleted, Zach LaVine was laboring, you know, God bless him. He was out there trying his best with one knee. DeMar was being double teamed, and you didn't have Lonzo, you didn't have Caruso. It just, the 3-point shot wasn't falling, and you're going against the defending NBA champions. But you saw that there's other basketball going on that's just so much superior. Next steps in the pyramid that is to get to the very tippy top of NBA championship. The Bulls are still a little bit behind. And I want to get into your thoughts of the future, because we've seen what it takes. You need to have a unicorn like a Giannis, like an Embiid, a Durant, who's not even in the playoffs anymore. Or you got to have a Booker. You got to have a Joker who's not even in the playoffs anymore. You need to have a Luka. It's so hard to win, but you need these guys. And now going into this offseason, Lonzo is still stagnant on what's going on with his knee. But we know there's going to be a job done on it. Or there has been, and he's going to have to rehab it and see where it is towards next season. Who knows with Zach? He is going to get the max deal. And here in the Sports Cubicle, you and I have talked about it. He has earned, in the NBA standards in today's days of NBA, a max contract. It's just whether or not the Bulls are going to give it to him or not. And what they're going to be able to be flexible enough to be creative. And that's what this Bulls team needs to do. And Marver, I'm wondering on your end, like, do you think they're going to offer him the max deal? And if they do you think they already have a plan in mind on what they need to do to get better? Because you saw, even this was a team that was a number 1 seed for a long time in the Eastern Conference. But I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, I don't think even the number 1 seed in the first half of the season, with DeMar bailing them out back-to-back games with crazy shots, was going to win an NBA Finals. So if they do sign Zach, do you think they already have a plan in mind of who they want to go after, what kind of blockbuster trade? The money is going to be tight, but that's why you bring in these assassins in Mark Eversley and AK to be creative. Do you think they extend a Zach LaVine? And do you think they already have a plan in mind? What do you think the future of this Bulls team holds when it comes to the front office and making roster moves?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've looked and we've discussed the free agents, and there's some that are appealing. You've mentioned some, I've mentioned some, and I'm sure that they have a plan should they not be able to sign LaVine, and that would free up some money, obviously, to do a lot of free agents, maybe get 2 for the LaVine price. But I'd like to see them not, break up their core, obviously. But if LaVine goes, that's part of their core. So who's going to step up? You'll need somebody else to score points. So that's the problem.
Let me ask you this. You brought up a key word, core. What is the core of the Bulls team? Because I know a lot of people have asked this question. We all have different answers. But I think my answer might be a little bit than yours, and it might be a little bit more conservative of an answer. But I want to get your thoughts. What is the core of the Chicago Bulls?
Well, I mean, they have some players that are younger than the ones that have a lot of the minutes. And the question is, will those players move into a position of where they can be starters and help the team win? And it looked to me as though in the playoffs, maybe no, because they weren't really getting any bench production at all. 3-point shooting, particularly rebounding, going to the basket. For even the starters didn't have any free throws. So maybe it was the matchup. They were afraid to get swatted, by by going to the basket, so by Lopez or the Greek Freak. But as it turned out, it just seemed like their weaknesses were exposed, and most of what they were shooting was, the 15, 20 footers. They couldn't get 3-point shooting. It was just looked like they were totally had their weaknesses exposed. So what they need is probably a big guy, another big guy, and a consistent 3-point shooter, because that was the difference. Really, for Milwaukee, the difference was the bench when it came down to it. If it hadn't been for the bench and the free throws, some of those games were pretty even. Particularly it's funny that they went ahead and the Milwaukee fans continued with the booing that occurred in Chicago. So it was funny, but that was the key: 3-point shooting. It was Grayson Allen.
Yeah, Grayson Allen and Bobby Portis absolutely torched the Bulls when Chris Middleton went down. I mean, that's how good this team was. And it was the other guys who were the ones who bailed them out. And that's why I asked you, the scout of our show, the marvelous one, Dan Marver, here on the Sports Cubicle. We are putting to rest, finally, the final time, the Chicago Bulls to 2021-2022 campaign. We'll be talking about it over the weeks and months as we see what this team does. But it's why I wanted to get your thoughts on the core. Because Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, myself, we've all talked about it. Like, is it Ayo? Is it Kobe? Is it Zach DeMar only? Is it Vucevic part of it? And I think that's what we're going to have to keep our eye on this offseason, is who does AK, Arturas Karnisovas, we know the assassin in the front office, who does he like? How fast does he have a trigger finger to pull a trade off? That is what we have to now see. It's going to be a fun offseason. It was a fun regular season. I think we all would have been ecstatic had it been vice versa. They had struggled in the beginning and got hot at the end. But it was the fact that, all in all, we saw an MVP first half season for DeMar DeRozan. We saw some growth from Zach LaVine, and they won a playoff game against a team that maybe might make it to the NBA Finals, even though Marver and I have been really high on Boston for a long time now. So we'll see if they can get past them. My NBA Finals is still Golden State versus the Celtics, but we'll see. Miami's still there. Phoenix is still there. But the Marvelous One, we'll get back to this as the weeks go on. I just wanted for you to get a chance to really take a look at the fun season we had at the United Center. So any final thoughts as we go on to Wrigley Field in just a little bit on the 2021-2022 Chicago Bulls?
Well, the Bulls exceeded expectations. We said that all along. I mean, for the first half of the year, I kept looking at the standings, and I thought that it was like a reality check, honestly, because I never expected them to do as well as they did, and they did well against everybody except for the top teams, as it turned out. They did horribly against all the playoff teams. So that's where maybe the next step is to get some pieces where they can beat the good teams. Again, what those pieces are, what they're going to lose, the young players. I mean, I haven't seen that the young players alone are going to be able to sustain this greatness, because it looked to me as though it was really, MVP type performance, by DeRozan, and the second assassin being LaVine, and then and Vukovic was fine. He was unable to hit 3-pointers in the playoffs, but again, he didn't drive to the basket like a lot of people his size do. But again, maybe he didn't want to be knocked unconscious.
Giannis is a man amongst men. Like that is it. He is a unicorn. But that is why the rest of these playoffs are going to be super fun. And the Marvelous One and I will be covering it here on the Sports Cubicle. But more importantly, we want to know what you thought of this campaign season for your Chicago Bulls. Who do you think is going to win the NBA Finals? Does Zach LaVine get a max deal? Let us know. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. Shout out to the Chicago Bulls for giving us a very entertaining NBA season. It's been a long time.